Is it a proof that things exist which are merely, um, so to speak, the object of a question? Um, okay, so here is the example. Um, Somebody asked of the um, silk-like skin of Kristen Stewart whether um, this a sense that no trace of bitter experience exists in uh, what shines forth in the phenomena of that uncalloused skin. Can one nonetheless posit a certain unfortunate inner experiences? So, in asking such a question, we seem to suggest that an answer is at all possible. So just as in Wittgenstein we have questions about where the thing we expect or intend actually is. So that, for instance, if I expect it to get darker in 20 minutes, what if in 20 minutes my expectation wasn't met? How would have I gotten wrong? Was it because I was, say it was still exactly like this in 20 minutes? That would suggest that I had to have an image of something. But is that time when it comes merely an image? So there's a gap between what expectations suggest vaguely and what we can supply to ourselves when we explain to ourselves how that works. We can supply the sense of an image and say maybe it was the images. We make up a story and say that the image is the less intense form of the being. But what does less intense mean? Does it mean the opposite, or does it mean somehow on a general scale less? But is less then something that's like the thing that's more, in the same way that a tree is sort of like a rhododendron bush? There's supposedly somehow there's shrubs and then there's trees and there's some connection somehow. Or is it in the way that like rain being bad weather is somehow a little bit like snow? This would then beg the question. This would then bring the question: is anything on a scale, greater, lesser, hot, cold, suggesting opposites, somehow of a higher cognitive dignity than any other kind of distinction or meaning we can present to ourselves? Any other distinction of one thing from the other? It would then push forward the view that some kind of quantitative, maybe not, we'd have the problem of hot and cold in several ways in the way it affects us without thinking of temperature, but because we grew up in a society where temperature and number goes with hot and cold, to some extent that would be natural to think in that way, although I suppose scalding hot water and burning hot water we don't necessarily need to know the temperature in order to come across that. So we have a situation where in the one form of thinking, we can doubt some things along those lines, but then we can draw it into very simple things like expectation or um, anticipation, and then asked, how does this operate, and then find there's no smooth way to do a conceptual account of it. Then we can ask again this question, like, once I've asked a question, does a certain appearance conceal behind it something else aside from the appearance? There's a strange sense that it should have a reality to it or not a reality to it, but then if it doesn't, the same kind of questions obtain. So when we begin to look at the questions, as we're going to, of how existentialism in Heidegger differs from other, for instance, Sartre's notion of existentialism, with an eye to seeing how Heidegger has put the emphasis on the Sein Frage rather than on any specific kind of ethics, any specific claim that, as in Sartre, that one has to take a stand on one's being somehow. What Heidegger describes that one can take a stand on one being, he describes at the same time that one doesn't have to. He doesn't point to one or the other, except that because he's the kind of being that actually, no, but that would be wrong, because what does he really point to is towards the Sein Frage itself. But he points to it in the claim that it's not an archetype. It's not a it's not something over and against, such that the subject, there's a subject-object situation involved. Whereas in Sartre, we can see his notion of existentialism is still this existence versus the telos. It doesn't direct us to the full depth. Now, since the Sein Frage asks a question, that's why I bring up this other peculiar situation of questioning, is that just because it asks a question, it's radically unclear that the mere posing of the question as it were posited realitat, or posited something as against the subject. It doesn't imply that the categories are pushed as far as they can be pushed, or that there's some solution has been given to the problem of the one and the many. So, I mean, I think we can say Heidegger directs us in a very peculiar direction, and whatever one says about whether it makes sense or not, I think that one can discover the direction he's pointing in. That would be the point.